To you, we're now in the 7th week of this search, and the work is still underway to try to identify a suspect. A key part of that has been trying to find any new video footage. 2 people briefed on the matter tell NBC News that investigators have been able to retrieve additional images from some of the other home surveillance cameras on Nancy's property, but they say those images unfortunately do not show any new suspicious activity or any other movement on the night of the abduction. So for now, those previously released surveillance images from Nancy's doorbell camera are the only known images that authorities have of the suspect, and really, Craig, the most important piece of evidence that investigators have right now.
Yeah, Liz, and there have been some reports that there's a potential new date that investigators are asking people about, asking neighbors about. What do we know about that?
Yeah, Hoda, well, as you know, early on, investigators put out that call asking residents in Nancy's neighborhood to send in any potentially relevant video footage going back to January 1st, a month before the abduction. But neighbors tell us that when investigators have actually showed up at their home, they have also asked about specific dates, notably the weekend of Nancy's disappearance, as well as January 11th. One neighbor tells us she was also asked about footage on January 20th.
As you're watching this video, forensic experts working the Nancy Guthrie case have just handed investigators something that changes the entire shape of this crime. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. What is emerging from the physical evidence in this case is not just an update. It is a reconstruction. A precise, scientific, detail-by-detail reconstruction of exactly what happened on that porch in the early hours of the morning. And what that reconstruction shows is something that every person following this case needs to hear. Because this was not one person acting alone. This was a team. A coordinated, pre-planned, multi-vehicle team that moved with the kind of operational precision that does not happen without serious preparation. And the blood on that porch is now telling us exactly how they did it. And this is not speculation. This is not some talking head guessing about what might happen. This is what the forensic evidence is actually showing right now. 70 days into this investigation, the physical evidence recovered from Nancy Guthrie's property is painting a picture so specific, so detailed, so damning that when you hear it laid out completely, the word coincidence will never enter your mind again. This crime was architected, and the architects left more behind than they realized. So buckle up. Because in this video, I am going to walk you through exactly what the blood pattern evidence tells us about how Nancy was removed from that porch, exactly what the vehicle evidence reveals about the scale and coordination of this operation, exactly why forensic experts now believe this involved at least 2 perpetrators and possibly more, and exactly why the strategic silence from investigators over these 70-plus days is not the sound of a case going cold. It is the sound of a case about to break. So if you are following this case, if you care about justice for Nancy Guthrie, if you want to understand what the science is actually telling us right now, do me a favor. Smash that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Because I want to hear from every person following this story. All right, let's get into it. So let me start with the blood. Because the blood on Nancy Guthrie's porch is not just evidence of violence. In the hands of a skilled forensic analyst, it is a narrative. A precise, scientific account of what happened and how. And forensic expert Marino O'Connell has now analyzed the blood pattern evidence from that porch and reached a conclusion that is as significant as anything this investigation has produced. The blood drops were vertical. Straight down. No smearing. No void patterns. No drag marks. No lateral movement of any kind. And I need you to understand why that matters so much. Because when a person walks while bleeding, they create a very specific pattern. The blood moves with them. It angles. It smears. It leaves voids where their feet interrupted the fall. It tells the story of someone in motion under their own power. But vertical drops that fall perfectly straight down with no lateral movement at all, tell a completely different story. They tell the story of someone who is stationary relative to the ground. Someone who is not walking. Someone who is being carried. Lifted off the ground and moved by someone else while their blood fell straight down beneath them. Forensic expert O'Connell's conclusion is direct and unambiguous. Nancy Guthrie did not walk out of that house. She was lifted. She was carried. And the blood trail confirms she was alive when it happened. Because active dripping blood requires active circulation, requires a beating heart, requires a body that is still fighting even as it is being moved against its will. Nancy was alive when they took her off that porch. And that single fact, as painful as it is to sit with, is also the most important piece of hope in this entire case. Now let me talk about what the blood trail stops telling us. Because where the blood ends is just as significant as where it begins. The trail stops before the driveway. It does not reach the street. It does not extend to where a vehicle parked at the curb would be. It stops short. And there is only one explanation for that. The vehicle that took Nancy was not parked at the curb. It was staged, positioned closer to the door, in a spot that minimized the distance Nancy had to be carried in the open, in a spot that was chosen in advance, chosen specifically to reduce exposure, reduce time in the open, and reduce the chance that anyone or anything would see what was happening. That vehicle placement was not luck. That was planning. And now let me walk you through the vehicle picture. Because this is where the scale of this operation truly comes into focus. And it is bigger than most people following this case have fully reckoned with. We know about the blue Honda CR-V belonging to the family. That vehicle has been in police custody for over 70 days, subjected to one of the most invasive forensic examinations I have ever covered on this channel. Panels stripped. Every surface swabbed. Electronics extracted to the point of damaging the vehicle's own circuitry. GPS logs, door logs, speed data, every digital record that vehicle contained pulled out and analyzed. Investigators held that car for 70 days because what was inside it was worth 70 days of work. But here is what makes the vehicle picture so much larger than just that one car. Investigators tracked a suspicious vehicle in the area of Via Entrada in the hours before the abduction. Before, not during. Hours before Nancy was taken, a vehicle was moving through that neighborhood in a way that caught investigators' attention. A reconnaissance vehicle. A vehicle whose presence in that area, at that hour, in the days and weeks that preceded the crime, tells investigators something critical. Someone was mapping that route. Someone was timing the drive. Someone was learning the neighborhood the way you learn it when you are planning to move through it quickly and cleanly in the dark. And then there is a third vehicle. An unidentified car captured at a nearby gas station during the abduction window. 3 vehicles. The family CR-V. The reconnaissance vehicle on Via Entrada. The unidentified car at the gas station. 3 separate vehicles, each playing a potential role in a single coordinated operation. That is not a lone attacker. That is a logistics network. And logistics networks require coordination, require communication, require multiple people who know the plan, know their role, and execute on command. And now let me bring in the footprint evidence. Because this is the detail that ties everything together. There are no footprints. In an area where blood was found, where an elderly woman was carried off a porch in the middle of the night, there is an absence of the kind of ground evidence you would expect from a single person struggling to move another person alone. And forensic analysts say the logistics of what happened that night, lifting and carrying an adult woman quickly and cleanly enough to stop the blood trail before the driveway, staged a vehicle in a non-obvious position, and executed the entire removal in the narrow window between 1:47 and 1:52 a.m., simply do not support the theory of one person working alone. The math of this crime requires at least 2 people, possibly more. 1 to carry, 1 to drive, 1 to manage the door, 1 to watch. The operational requirements of what was done that night point unmistakably toward a team. And the DNA evidence backs that up. Because forensic analysis of the material recovered from the scene has revealed DNA from multiple individuals. Not one profile. Multiple. Which means multiple people left biological material at or around the scene of this crime. And while mixed DNA is one of the more challenging types of evidence to work with in terms of getting clean individual profiles, its presence here is deeply significant. Because it confirms what the blood pattern and the vehicle evidence and the logistics of the operation already suggested. This was not a one-person job. Now let me talk about the pre-abduction surveillance. Because this is the thread that connects everything else. Investigators did not just track that suspicious vehicle on Via Entrada on the night of the crime. They went back further. They requested footage from weeks before the abduction, which means they believe this neighborhood was under observation long before January 31st, long before the dinner, long before the call at 1:44 in the morning. Someone was watching this property, mapping the route, learning the rhythms of life in that neighborhood, identifying the best position to stage a vehicle, timing how long it took to move from point A to point B, working out every logistical detail of an operation that was eventually going to have to execute perfectly in the dark in a matter of minutes. And when you stack that surveillance on top of the 3-date pattern we have already identified, January 11th, January 24th, and January 31st, the picture that emerges is of a criminal operation that was in preparation for weeks. Not days. Weeks. With multiple people. Multiple vehicles. A reconnaissance phase. A coordination phase. And a precisely executed operational phase triggered by a phone call at 1:44 in the morning. Let me bring this down to what it means in human terms. Because behind all of the forensic analysis and the vehicle tracking and the DNA profiles, there is an elderly woman who was carried off her own porch in the middle of the night by people who had spent weeks learning how to do it, who had practiced the route, who had staged their vehicle in the right position, who had a phone call ready to serve as a trigger, who knew that the neighborhood internet would go dark at exactly the right moment. Nancy Guthrie was not a random victim. She was targeted, studied, and taken by people who were very, very good at what they did. And that is why the silence from investigators, including Chris Nanos, is not the silence of a case that has run out of road. It is the silence of investigators who know exactly where the road leads and are making absolutely certain that when they walk down it, they walk down it with everything they need. Legal experts and investigative analysts who have been watching this case say the silence points in one of 3 directions. A pending arrest that is closer than the public realizes. An ongoing process of consolidating evidence from multiple sources into a single coherent prosecutable case. Or a deliberate strategic decision to withhold key details in order to avoid tipping off suspects who may still be monitoring the investigation. None of those 3 explanations suggest a case that is stalled. All 3 of them suggest a case that is nearly ready. Here is where things stand today. The blue Honda CR-V was held for over 70 days and subjected to an invasive electronic forensic extraction that damaged its circuitry. Forensic expert Marino O'Connell concluded that vertical blood drops with no smearing indicate Nancy was carried, not walked, off that porch. Active blood dripping confirmed she was alive during the removal. The blood trail stopping before the driveway indicates the getaway vehicle was staged in a non-obvious position closer to the door. A suspicious vehicle was tracked on Via Entrada in the hours before the crime, suggesting advance reconnaissance. 3 separate vehicles are now tied to this case, including the family CR-V, the Via Entrada vehicle, and an unidentified car at a nearby gas station. The absence of footprints and the logistics of the removal strongly suggest at least 2 perpetrators. Mixed DNA evidence from multiple individuals has been recovered from the scene. And investigators have maintained strategic public silence that experts interpret as a sign of an imminent or carefully staged legal action. Whoever carried Nancy Guthrie off that porch believed they had planned for everything. They accounted for the cameras. They accounted for the internet. They accounted for the timing. They staged their vehicle. They coordinated their team. They mapped their route. But they did not account for what a single vertical blood drop tells a forensic expert about exactly how a victim was moved. They did not account for a surveillance camera at a gas station capturing a vehicle during the wrong window. They did not account for investigators going back weeks into neighborhood footage to track a reconnaissance pattern. And they did not account for what 70 days of forensic work on one blue Honda CR-V was going to pull out of that vehicle's memory. They left a trail. And investigators have been following it every single day for over 2 months. Justice for Nancy Guthrie is being built right now. And I am going to be here when it arrives. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure those notifications are on. And I will see you in the next one.